All right, and here we are. This is the Working Title Show with Zach Sams, and we are back. And here we are. We are back. This is the Working Title Show with Zach Sams. It has been a long time, and I am very excited to be back in the studio and recording. And Trey, hey man, long time no see. I'm glad to see you and glad to be back with you.
It's been quite some time. You look just as good now as the last time I saw you.
Yeah, well, we discussed that. It's higher quality cameras, I think. But nevertheless, it's great to be here, cameras and all. And I'm excited to be recording again. It has been it's been a bit. It's we were derailed by the COVID pandemic, and it's just been a long road back. But I'm glad to be here. And I was doing a little research before today to kind of see how long it has been. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that we recorded a show, our last show of 2019 in that December. And then in 2020, we recorded two shows prior to the pandemic. And then we had one squirrely show that we recorded in April that was actually the only show we've recorded like via Zoom or, some other, not live. And that was short-lived. And then the next show, we tried to bring it back in May of 21. And that's the funny thing, is because our guest today, Rush Graves, founder and managing principal at AMR Capital, was our last show that we recorded in May, Rush. And then we just didn't do it again. And I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, I have ideas. We get busy, we get sidetracked and things like that. And that was a good show, actually.
It was very productive.
So it wasn't the show, and it wasn't you, Rush, that stopped us from recording. So I don't want you to think that. But it's also Rush who has brought us back here today. I think I was playing in your golf event, your charity event, the AMR Rise for Hope.
Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful golf tournament.
Absolutely.
Great charity. Yeah.
Great charity, great event. It was a lot of fun. And I saw you there and you said, hey, let's do a podcast. And I said, I've been wanting to do one. And that was just, that kind of led us back here. And we met with Jeff Crilly at Real News PR. A little plug there for Jeff. We were on his show. Yeah. And now here we are. So a lot has changed since our weird shows of 2020, our one little show in 21, and here we are back in 2023. And I kind of wanted to just kind of fill in that gap a little bit, because it's anybody we have the ups and downs of life in the world that goes on, but 2020 was just, it takes the cake in my opinion on kind of the stuff that we'd gone through. But since then, we've had presidential election, we've had midterm elections. It's not a political show, so we're going to leave that there. We had the big inflation craze, right? Still have that a little bit. And then we had the Fed. A lot of other things happened too, but then we had the Fed start raising rates at the fastest, historical clip, that's ever happened in the history of the Fed. And so, 2020, like commercial real estate stopped, didn't it? We didn't do anything.
It slowed considerably.
Considerably slowed, right?
We stayed active, but that's us being opportunistic.
Right.
But overall, it has definitely slowed.
It was a super slowdown, especially across the board in our business. And that went through all of 2020, and then 21 things started happening again, and we roared through. At the end of 21 might have been the strongest quarter that I've ever had in business. And then that continued into the first and second quarter of 22, and then boom, that's when the rates started going up. That's right. And funny thing is, I told my wife in the summer 22, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to make less money in 23 because of these rates. And she kind of rolled her eyes at me and didn't really listen. And then about right at the end of the first quarter of this year, she said, you know, you're not making as much money as you did last year. And I said, well, thanks for noticing. So, you know, that was the one thing I can predict, less money.
She was warned.
She was warned, but she brought it up. So, but, you know, all things, you know, considered, we are in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Great metro of Dallas, Fort Worth, great state of Texas. And like a lot of us said back in the 2008, 2009 thing, thank goodness that we are here in Texas, because we're, you know, as bad as things could be, man, can you imagine being in the Northwest or the Northeast right now trying to do our business?
It could be a lot worse. That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, now that we're in this kind of new norm, I think it's really cool that we are getting back together and talking about what is going on in our business and in our economy, specifically around real estate. And you and I were talking about this the other day. If you want to know what's happening, you know, in our worlds or in this real estate world, it's hard to get good information. Don't you think? Because it's very granular information. I mean, like what you do, you're not going to turn on channel 4 and find out a real great update on what's going on in the development of self-storage, are you?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, you're really not.
So, you know, for us to kind of bring these things to light and talk about kind of what we're seeing on the ground, hopefully it'll be beneficial for people that, you know, that might find us and listen. So we'll see.
You know, this was a big plus before. So when we had what was our last show that we did, investors enjoyed it. Investors liked it. They like hearing what's going on, because people can see reports, and that's fine. You know,
Right.
They get their monthly reports, but to actually hear the commentary, some of the ins and outs of what they're invested in was a big deal. So when it came up, or when you and I were discussing it, I just remembered some of the comments from both existing and prospective investors.
Right.
That really saw the benefit to it. So it was really that's more of the drive.
Right. Well, and that's good to get that that kind of feedback, you know, from the people that you're trying to connect with, right?
Right.
Trey, how are we doing on time this segment?
Oh, we are good. We are at about 7 minutes right now, 7.5.
All right, perfect. Well, so Rush, kind of what I want to get into in the next segment, I want to kind of talk about what you've seen, you know, in your business, how you're dealing with the current climate, and just how, you know, how you've stayed engaged and how you're moving forward, because it's got to be a little bit more challenging time than it was last time we were on the air, isn't it?
Definitely.
Because in 21 you weren't dealing with, you know, the drastic change that we've had in rates, and I would think that trickled down all across your business and everything that you do.
It really has. We do find some security in some of our projects are in on 5 to 10 year terms. And so when you think about where you might be stuck trying to refinance right now, because obviously the market's not there to sell.
Right.
So when you think about coming down to a refinance, we're just very fortunate in that we've got 2 to 3 years before it's really time to start thinking about that.
Before it's critical.
That's right. And so we'll have the opportunity to go a couple of ways. One, pay down some of the debt that's still at low rates. Some of our debt, we're still in the high 3s. Some of our regional banks are more of the mid 4s, so on. And those are the shorter term, or in this case, 2 to 3 years remaining on those loan terms.
Right.
So and paying full principal and interest. So it's a decent pay down and plenty of time to prepare for the refinance.
Sure. And I think that's something that, you know, even your everyday, you know, at least homeowner can understand, because, I mean, if you own a home and you bought it any time before, you know, 22, even halfway through 22, you know what a rate crunch you're looking at if refinancing
That's
is
right.
something that you want to get into. So, well, let's take a quick break, and we will talk more with Rush and what he's seeing in the commercial real estate sector here in Dallas and Texas and beyond when we come back. This is the Working Title Show with Zach Sams. right, we are back. This is the Working Title Show with Zach Sams, and still with me, Rush Graves, the founder and managing principal at AMR Capital. Rush, I was looking, I was reading the news this morning, and one of my most favorite headlines that I've read in a while, specifically because we're a New York headquartered company, and I love to give my New York counterparts a hard time. But the headline is, for the first time, fast-growing Texas, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee, this is out of the Dallas Morning News, are contributing more to the national GDP than the Northeast.
I believe it.
Are you surprised by that at all?
Not one bit.
I'm not surprised by it either.
Not one bit. Not with the amount of people who've been moving, picking up and heading to these areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like to send that headline up to the Northeast to my friends up there, just to let them know that, Texas is the true king.
As long as it's not your boss, you're sending it to you.
Oh, I definitely send it to my boss. He really loves to hear about how great Texas is.
Sound like a good relationship.
Yeah, it's a good relationship.
Good.
So that's I found that not surprising, but a great headline as we and I think everybody that lives in this area, whether you've lived here for a long time or you're just moving here, you can feel that it's crazy out there. Going anywhere, trying to buy anything. I mean, just a quick fun fact, I live in the Argyle area, which and when I grew up there, when I was in 8th grade, there were 65 kids in my class in 8th grade. Today, we didn't, and I say 8th grade because we didn't have a high school at that time. Today, we're a 5A high school, and it's grown. We've gone all the way through 4A and 5A in like the last 3 years. It's really, it's a crazy thing. And so, all the people that we have down here, that's really helping us out in your business. So, but with that said, and as we alluded to in the first segment, other than, we know that the rates have changed in the debt world and they're a lot higher. But what else has changed in the world of debt? Because I mean that's y'all's engine, right? The debt, that's what makes deals happen. So what else has changed there, and what are y'all dealing with?
Really, the banks, even non-bank lenders, are becoming, they're far more cautious of what they're willing to step into, reaching for a little more surety. Any chance that they get might be raising the requirements or the minimums that a property has to meet.
Right.
Probably raise, but the interest rate overall has been it's been quite a task to deal with. So there's a lot more shopping now taking place of different debt providers. Some new lenders coming out of the woodwork that you didn't expect before. So we're finding a decent amount of competition, but again, they're far more guarded and rightly so.
What do you see a big spread when, let's just be very elementary here. You're looking at a deal that you're trying to finance. Do you find a big spread across the different lenders that you're talking to in the rate? I mean, you're talking to 5 different lenders. How far apart are these different rates that they're quoting to you?
Well, it's if you're talking about regional banks, they're not too terribly far apart.
Right.
But when you get into some of the life coasts, then they could be just kind of in a world of their own, but have different metrics they like to see met. Other non-bank lenders may have an incredibly large spread, comparatively speaking, but can move faster, or might come in at a higher loan to value or loan to cost, depending on the project. So it's just a matter of really being able to fit what works. So if you are after an existing product, but you could see holding that for some time, then you might look into the 5 to 10 year term. Now, naturally, the more years you add onto the term, the better rate you're going to get overall, and you get a low enough loan to value, 50% or so, then you might be able to get 10 years of interest only. And so they're trying to counter that where they can. But for example, CMBS product, where a few years ago we would get in the high 3s. Now in interest only, you're finding mid to upper 6s.
Interesting.
Right. And that's coming in with a 50 to 55% loan to value. So,
How much has that changed? in 21, what were your loan to values on average? Were they around 50 or were they much higher than
So
that?
they would, all too often, you would have lenders that naturally, as they're competing with one another, you would get close to 70%, if not right at 70%.
Right. Is that unheard of now?
Now you're going to be looking more in the 60, maybe 65 if you've got some banks competing with one another. But there again, there's other limitations you could run into, the debt service coverage ratio, so on. So it having to meet a few more metrics that maybe they weren't so concerned about before.
Interesting. So how do you find deals when rates change so drastically? When you're looking at penciling something, you're talking about, a cost of 3% for money, and now you're looking at a cost of 6. It seems like that almost be impossible to find deals. So how do you find deals now? I know it was hard before because of the amount of competition. Is the competition less?
That's right. There's a little less competition, and we're finding that there are not as many sellers. And while you get a decent amount that still go through typical brokerage process and trying to push out onto the market and so on, there are quite a few that we encounter almost weekly, where people saying, "Look, I don't want to put it out on the market, but here's the number that we're after on a sale price. Can you reach this number?" And so it's a little more one-on-one, where these owners are calling and talking to me about it and seeing if they're actually sellers, trying to become sellers. There are other times when we run into more of a fire sale situation where someone acquired a property 2-3 years ago and it's time to refinance. So they acquire it. Maybe they came in at that 65 or 70% loan to value, and upgraded the property and made all the changes they were going to. And now it's time to refinance. But still, to refinance, they have to go raise more equity.
Right.
And we've found multiple where the equity partners are not ready to supply any capital for that refi, because the deal just didn't meet what they're after, and so now it's time to sell.
Through no fault of their own, there's got to be people in groups that are just in the situation where they were underwriting to their old standards before the rates went up. Now that they've changed, that 3-year exit or that 3-year recap just isn't possible anymore. Not that they did anything wrong when they bought it. It's just there's always going to be a time factor.
But there is.
Or a timing factor. They didn't, they might not have known that the rates were going to go skyrocketing that way. So now they're in a pickle, basically.
Yeah, and there are quite a few that maybe their goal was to have it sold and possibly double their money in that 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And now they're finding, well, they can't reach that. Now they have to add time to that total project timeline.
Right.
And so it throws you for a loop a little bit, especially when you plan on selling.
Is that the worst thing ever in your position, when you have to go back to your investors and say, like, we need to raise
It is
more?
It is. It's painful,
Right.
Because you push as hard as you can every day to make sure that you're staying plenty conservative on your underwriting, knowing projects, and you, in this case, rates. What would be seen as something just coming out of the woodworks that can bite you.
Yeah.
And then having to go back to investors, and that's just it is not a good feeling, and something we just avoid like the plague. And
they probably know where and the investors don't want that. It's not good for anyone, right?
No, it's nobody enjoys having to go back for a cash call.
All right, but I mean, sometimes that's just part of the deal, right?
It is a part of it, and you really need to. You try to be ready for situations like that, but in some cases, maybe you don't know how things are going to play out, or in this case, where rates might climb to.
For sure. When it comes to rental rates and the cost of capital going up, I mean, we've seen in other asset classes, that's always been one of the benefits. Well, if I can raise the rent, as the cost of capital goes up, we can hedge off, some of those issues. But I mean, rents have been going up for a long time. Can they do they still have further to go? I mean, there's always got to be a choking point at some point, right?
Well, there is. And it's, you play it out on a site by site basis, looking at where occupancy is right now, and then constantly shopping your competitors.
Right.
And there are some some operators of storage facilities in this case that will say, every 3 months we raise rates, period. And they've been that same way for years. It's worked for them. Occupancy may fall off 6 or 7 or whatever percent.
Is that on everyone that they have in, that's leasing at that time, or is it every 3 months they're raising the new lease rate?
It adjusts more regional.
Okay.
I know for us, we get a little more site specific. And so if we look, we've got properties that are operating very well. In some cases, we have some that sit at a 97 and 99% occupied every month. It's strong. And so you judge it. You want to keep increasing rents where you can. You don't want to run people off, but you're able to monitor that. So for every rent increase, did you lose occupancy? And naturally you're comparing that to the market around you. Where'd our competitors sit? Or in the case of some of our product, there's a huge void in the area for what we have to offer, and so it's in demand. And so they would be willing to pay a little bit more and make sure that they can keep those units,
right?
Because it may pertain to their work situation, so on, storage for work, and so on. So it's you play it site by site. You want to keep pushing rents, but for now, for us at all of our sites, every 3 to 6 months or so, we're able to increase rents. I think the difference with us, and this kind of goes back to my original career in multifamily, is if we're increasing rents, then what are we doing for the tenant?
Right.
Is it earned? Can we go make it, add security cameras, improve the gates, control access, which may not be a huge fee overall, but the tenants see that going on, and so they really have no problem paying the extra rent because they see what we're putting back into the property.
Right.
And so I look at it as though we're, and my staff hears this often enough, we are earning that rent increase.
Right.
And it may be just 1 month worth of rental income, 1 or 2 months that may have paid for what we took care of on the property,
right?
On total cost, and then you're earning that throughout the year and then some, right? But they still see the change,
right?
People
and the cost
want
of
to
your
see the change.
operation's always going up too, I'm sure.
Correct.
Right. So what are investors saying today? Are you do you have to find new ones? Have you lost investors just because of the way the market's gone? Not because of something y'all did, just because, well, hey, maybe they're like me and 2023 is not as lucrative as it was in 2022. What's going on there? So you
rare, once in a blue moon, we have somebody fall off for whatever reason might be. But other than that, we have investors that are even on their 5th and 6th rounds of reinvesting with us. So it's gone very well. We've got a great group of investors, and we're always adding to it as we continue to grow. So, because for some, they might invest in a product, and it could be 2 or 3 years before they can reinvest, or that's what they have dedicated for AMR. So it would be going full cycle on that product, and then they can reinvest what they have with us. So.
Right. Do most investors, are they asset by asset typically on y'all's races with your investors?
Some of course we're a registered state fund manager. Some like the single asset as if it's new construction, it can be a little higher risk, but so they like that ride, that roller coaster. Others like the fund because it offers a little more security. And that's some of the product. The fund product is what we have offered on what used to be the TD Ameritrade and Charles Schwab alternative platforms. Now it's just Schwab, but our funds are traded on the Schwab alternative platforms as well, so they can go through their money manager if the money manager is on the Schwab platform.
Interesting. Trey, how we doing on time this segment, buddy?
So we are at 26 minutes right now.
All right. Well, why don't we just take a quick break there, and we'll finish up in the next segment, Rush. This is the Working Title Show with Zach Sams, and we will be right back. All right, and we are back. This is the Working Title Show with Zach Sams, and I have to say that music's pretty amazing, isn't it, Rush? Trey, who is that? Is that Hair 3?
That was a choking instrumental by Seven Carlson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very, very specific band. They're playing this weekend at Bob's Steak and Chop House. You should go check them out.
They're very well known.
Very well known. Very well known. Thank you, Trey.
You got it.
So, Rush, in the last segment, we were talking about investors, and they're the fuel of your business, right? The investors that's who you work for.
That's right.
I mean, at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, they make us who we are. That's absolutely right.
So, pre-22, mid-22, before the rates went, crazy, I would imagine that the conversations and the issues that might come up with investors or their concerns at that time have changed to this time.
Yeah, they really have.
To what we're seeing now. So I'm sure some of those are around rates, but like what's changed in your conversations? What concerns investors today that didn't concern them in at the beginning of 22?
Sure. So I would say over the last 6 months, really, people call, and they did before then, but really more concentrated, more often over the last 6 months. They call and they ask, well, what rates do the projects have? What's the rate, interest rate on the projects?
And they're talking about your financing?
And they're talking about the financing on the projects that they're invested in. And so while you push that and you let them know that in really all cases except what might be a new construction or acquisition plus addition, that we're locked in. But they still want that reassurance that what they're invested in is not about to see some monster.
So they're worried about maybe
like
that it could be a variable rate, and they're going to invest
absolutely
today, and then next year, they're getting a capital call because now your rates have gone up.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's really been
probably
a
a good
big concern. And then they've called and asked about the lenders. How strong are the lenders? Are we going to have to worry about lenders going belly up?
Is that
we're using for these projects? And
is that because of the Silicon Valley Bank and those kinds of things failing? People are asking about that.
That's right. That's when those calls really started.
Yeah.
They just wanted a little bit of reassurance, and you can't blame them. Right?
No, I don't think so. You heard a lot like that was going to be a bigger deal than it was. Like that was really going to jack up commercial real estate lending, these bank failures. It didn't seem like that happened as much as everybody was screaming. What about in your point of view? Did that change much?
It didn't really because of the relationships that we have.
Mm-hmm.
The lenders that we work with, we work hard to make sure are taken care of, naturally making payments and so on like we're supposed to, not leaving them hanging, but really work hard to make sure that they're taken care of almost as much as we take care of our investors.
Right.
And so it's through some of those relationships that we've really been able to maybe move forward on some projects that maybe some new owner operators are not able to. Those relationships are not there.
Right.
And it goes back to as I mentioned before, the current rates. Where we got in on these projects at a decent time. Projects are making money, and so we're majority of this we're able to ride this out.
Right.
But really your only unexpecteds that we've truly hit were some of the projects and property taxes taking a big increase in a lot of cases, which we, like anyone else, you challenge those every chance that you get, and then the cost of insurance. So really,
has that been bad? And I know in the multifamily world, it's been catastrophic. Are y'all seeing the same type of increases in insurance and storage?
It really has.
Really,
it really has. You take a big hit, and then and naturally you have your insurance guys go out and shop it again, or
right.
So at the time of renewal or whatever you can get out of, as soon as you find something cheaper, then you're able to capitalize on it. But that has been a big deal. And naturally with that comes the larger escrow amounts that have to be sent to the bank so they can hold those larger amounts on top of the higher payments month after month. So it's I wouldn't say a shock. It's more of a pain in the rear, but again, something that we we just have to deal with. But overall projects are strong. Our lowest occupancy on any property right now is 90%, and that's because we moved some people out so we could upgrade a part of the property.
Okay.
Everything else we usually
And 90% still usually considered pretty decent, I would think.
90% is decent, but even being down to 90%, that property still comes in. I believe it's 7 or 8% over projected each month.
What is the standard break-even occupancy rate in storage? I'm sure it varies, but is there kind of a standard percentage?
Well, it goes a few different ways. If you have a new construction project and you say, well, how soon does this project take care of itself, pay
Right.
its own bills, then you could be anywhere from 53 to 58% occupied.
Okay.
Anything after that is what can start taking care of your investors and so on. But as it sits now, some people have paid so much for these projects that they have to be really stable to be able to pay the bills and pay any investors at all. In this case, in the world of storage, you're 85% occupied and up is what's considered stable.
Right.
So, big deal.
So we see it in the title insurance industry. When times are good, bunch more title companies start showing up on the street, right? You see it in the residential real estate world, every housewife that's not, that's not already employed becomes a real estate agent, and then you see some contracting in there. Our good friend Will Givens, we always like to laugh that, people could screw up and make money, prior to 22.
Yeah.
So are you seeing, and this is probably, I would think your investors would find this to be good, that, strong fundamental based, development ownership groups like yourself, like AMR, I would think that y'all's pool of competitors has to contract some in here, because some people think this stuff's easy. Like, I'll just go build a building, charge rent, I'm going to make a lot of money until you actually really have to underwrite stringently or before rates move. So are you seeing that happen in your world?
So we are. We're seeing a reduction in new construction. Seeing projects listed for sale right now where they went through permitting plans, ready to move forward, and then all of a sudden it just became a bad deal overall, whether it's cost of debt or whatever their case may have been. And so you see multiple listings out there that are raw land that are completely fine-tuned, ready for storage.
Entitled, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the new construction to the existing product, we've got some amazing new construction projects that we're wrapping up everything on now, and then we've got this push back to more acquisition of existing product because of what we're seeing out there, because of some of the fire sales that need to take place with some of these owners that just can't support it. They don't have the ability to go raise the capital they need for a refinance, whatever. And in a lot of cases, we're able to make them an offer. Now, naturally, we are really, I would say, about conservative to a fault when it comes to our underwriting. So it has to meet what that offer could be. But if they're in a position where it has to get out of their hands, then oftentimes we're able to do that for them. So as much as I love the new construction, I would say the market is shifting more to people that are in a little bit of a tough situation on ownership of existing. So you find some product that's, the ones we find are most of the time stabilized at 85% and up. But maybe the operator just wasn't able to run it quite right. And so with us being vertically integrated, we're really able to keep our finger on the pulse of every project that's in our portfolio, what we can do to improve the project, increase revenues for our investors, and keep moving. So I like to say a well-oiled operations machine that is just growing smooth and steady.
Taking advantage of these new opportunities.
That's right.
Well, tell us, how is the AMR projects overall doing, and then why don't you lead into kind of some of the area? I know Dallas Fort Worth is, probably y'all's number one, right? But what other areas are y'all operating in or looking to operate in going forward?
Sure.
But how is the health of your projects to date?
So right now, all the projects, granted those that are not under construction, everyone is producing we're coming in on the month. We finished last month 12% over projected overall across
Wow.
the portfolio. Did very well, and naturally, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't increase what was required on the projected for every quarter or so. Anyway, so
Right, sure.
staff did a great job. We met and beat projected. Did very well, and that's everywhere from we like Oklahoma, naturally through Texas. Texas has just been amazing as a whole. The occasional projects, cherry picked a little bit of Arkansas, a little bit of Florida. So we're just staying opportunistic, and we look for not just anything conventional. It really has to. We look for a void. So, for example, in an area, if you have if you have an area where there's a big void for, say, boat and RV storage, for example, then that would be worth pursuing or adding to the area, or picking up a property that maybe has some acreage where you could add that and fill that void. Comes down to the meeting demand, right?
Yeah.
Some could be conventional, old school drive up with roll up doors, or it could be a 3 or 4 story climate control, all single building. So it's really a matter of keeping your head on a swivel, having a wonderful valuation team, and that really knows what's needed, what's the value, and of course acquisitions that can get out and work deals. See what
Right.
types of opportunities are out there that we can capitalize on.
And what's the metric when there's a void? I mean, a friend of mine who's also in your business told me they look for 7,000 rooftops around storage in a certain mileage. I wanted to say it was 1 to 3 or something like that, or maybe it's bigger. Is those still good numbers? Is that what y'all are looking for?
Everybody has their own difference, but it's more of you might look at a storage per capita. How many square feet per certain amount of population on a 1, 3, and 5. But for example, we've got a beautiful project going up in Prosper right now. That is, it's a majority of it are the larger units, 50-foot units,
Wow.
for example, with electric, lighting, so on, fully enclosed, lockable. But that's because our competition are a little bit of covered parking or open parking lots where people are storing these
Okay,
big,
so you're saying there's a
beautiful
void of
RVs.
this size there, and
That's
so
right.
by bringing this to the market, that y'all are filling that need.
That's
Okay.
right.
So
And all
it's-
these beautiful homes going in around it. I would say 400, although I think most of them are 500 and up, that are within HOAs. You don't have the ability to park that luxury item there, so
Right.
they can have something near their house
Yeah.
in our area, or they can drive, and some might find something cheaper, but they're driving 5 or 10 miles away, whatever it might be.
So
it's-
people's junk and HOAs have got to be self-storage's best friend.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is, and on top of it, the multifamily.
Yeah.
So, it's always nice to see a large multifamily site go in, and we're happy to cater to them.
Right on. Rush, man, it's been fun.
This has been a great time. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I do too. Great show, great segment. Glad to be back, and we look forward to the next one. This has been the Working Title Show with Zach Sams, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.